Hey Natalie, alright, so here is your past life spread. So what we're going to do is look at where you were, what you did with the majority of your time, an important day with the relationships and feelings involved, another important day, relationships, feelings, we'll come to the death, and then the lesson learned. And we'll get hints of time throughout, alright? So all I'm going to do is relay to you the images and impressions that are coming through. And your job is going to be to try to make connections where you can based off of what comes through here and your current life. And I'll try to help however I can with that as well, okay? So just keep in mind too that there are a couple types of way to make connections, okay? So one way is direct, another way is opposite. Direct connections is based on what we see here and you mirroring certain things that you see here, whether it's traits or patterns or whatever. The opposite connection would be whatever comes through here, you're experiencing it opposite, because sometimes our souls, or a lot of times, our souls like to experience things they haven't before. So that would make a lot of sense too. So just bear with me, we'll get started and you'll see. Okay, so where we're going, here is the, or I guess we can hold it like that. This is Asia. Obviously, that's a large space to cover, but where I'm being drawn right away feels like we're going where we would consider Russia to be. And I don't know how much Russia has changed over time, but it does feel like we are being put back in a time that I would say is prior to 19th century. So it feels like we're looking at maybe 1700s, maybe 1800s, but feels more like 1700s, possibly even 16, but in that range. Obviously we can't get like a direct date, but there might be some details coming up where we can kind of narrow it down a little bit, but that's where it feels like we're going. So even that by itself could be a couple of connections where it's like, oh, were you interested in school learning about history in that time period, in the 16, 17, maybe 1800s, that kind of thing, because it's a specific kind of aesthetic, it's a specific kind of living, a certain lifestyle. So that kind of thing, is that interesting to you? And if not, that's fine. Another connection would be Russia itself, if you've ever been drawn to Russia, if you've ever been pulled to the art, the language, the food, if you've ever seen photos of Russia and felt an emotional connection, or oh man, I really want to see that in person, or that looks familiar, or that feels like there's a pull, that kind of thing, an emotional trigger of some kind. That would be a connection as well. Little things like that. Some people, like for example, they had what's it called, like a toy, like a certain toy, like a souvenirish kind of thing from a certain place one time, that I mentioned, oh hey, if you have one of these, that would be a connection, and they have one of those. So it's like these little things you don't even think about are, like for example, I guess what I would say for this would be if you had one of those Russian nesting dolls, you know, the little dolls inside the dolls, or if you've ever wanted one or seen it and were really pulled to get it, even if you didn't get it, that kind of thing. And if not, that's fine. So if we see some things that you feel like, oh, I'm not really connected, that's cool, just tuck it in the back of your mind, because sometimes we go through phases and things that come through in these, sometimes you'll see a year later or in the future, it'll pop up and then you'll be like, oh, that's what this was. So let's see if we can get a little bit more narrowed down here. Hold on with the Russia. Okay, so when I was actually laying this down, I did want to mention right away that we're looking at the life of a male. So whenever I'm reading for someone and an opposite gender comes up, there's always a couple of things I like to bring up. For example, would be if you find in your life, if you're a female and you find in your life that you exhibit tomboyish traits, or what we consider masculine traits, which, you know, is just, I guess, more like outgoing or more confident or more this or that, what we would consider more masculine, then that would be a connection as well. Hold on. Also, even like gender issues, sexuality issues, anything like that. I say issues. What I mean is, like, have you always felt like maybe uncomfortable in your body? That kind of thing has come through before. But if it doesn't, that's totally fine. But that's just what I like to mention when we look at opposite, genders coming through when I'm reading someone. So keep that in mind. All right. Now, what you do with the majority of your time. This card here is the food card, and a lot of times we get this card when we're talking about like literally people that like work in the food industry, like a chef or bread maker. We had, you know, there all kinds of, we had someone who was a what's it called, a taste tester for the like a royal so-and-so to test for poison. We had that come through. So there's all kinds of things that can come through for these cards that maybe aren't like a literal translation. So for this, what came through was not that you worked in the food industry, but that you came upon it a lot in very different ways. Now, what it feels like you actually did for a living, when it was coming through, it was like little bits and pieces, because it's not something I think I've come across, or yeah, I mean, it's just like, it seems kind of new, but it felt like you were kind of like a messenger that went out to all kinds of places, covered a vast region of land, and you weren't the only one. It feels like there is a group of messengers. It feels like you worked for what they would, I don't know what they had. Did they have a czar back then, or a king, or whatever it was, whatever the royal thing was, the thing that was in charge, the government, there you go. Whatever government body was in charge, it feels like you worked in a group for them, and the group were a bunch of people that were assigned tasks to go out and cover a specific region. And in their region, they would go, almost like it felt, from town to town, and even like household to household, to deliver certain news. So that's what it feels like. It feels like, because, you know, back then, no computers, no other way of doing things. It's almost like kind of like a mail system, but for the government. So what this brings up is the idea of communication. So communication as a theme might be important in your life currently. It could be communication as far as you feel like you don't communicate as well as you should. You have trouble expressing yourself. So this would be an opposite connection, because this aspect of you was a great communicator. He did it for a living, a job, one of the best. So it'd be very normal, or it would make sense if in this current life you feel like you might struggle with communication or expression, right? So the direct connection would be if you are excellent at communication, that is your job. Maybe you have a career in marketing or advertising, or a therapist where you listen and communicate to your clients, or you know what I mean? There's honestly like boundless opportunities or options when it comes to communication. You could be a hairstylist and have excellent communication, and they're known for that. You know what I mean? So see how communication fits with your life right now. If anything, this would be a message just reminding you that it's in your soul memory, communication. And it could be coming up, let's say, you're having issues with a certain relationship in your life. And as I say that, if anything comes to mind right now as far as having issues with a certain relationship, someone in your life, then that is what we're talking about. If nothing comes up or no one comes to mind, fine, that's fine. But if someone comes to mind, this could be coming up as a message for you to take a step back and remember who you are. Remember, you have all the tools you need in order to communicate effectively with someone. Now, communication, what I feel like is coming through is the idea that communication is not always verbal, and it's not always about actually getting things out to each other. Sometimes best communication is done by taking a step back and giving space. So if that rings a bell for you with anything happening in your life, then that would be the message for you coming through, is to remember that taking space, or allowing someone to take space when you might be someone that wants to get resolution, someone else might work a little different and need space, or vice versa. Just remember, everyone's different, and that communication sometimes looks different than what we think it should look like. All right? So just keep that in mind. Now, the food thing also has to do with hospitality. So what happened, why I feel like this food card is coming up, is because this aspect really made, I want to say friends, but more like good acquaintances, good connections, almost like networking, but not really, but like friends. Like, he would stay at people's houses in the towns he would visit, and it feels like these towns were very like small. Like, it feels like we're looking at like countryside towns, like not these large citadels and cities. Like, this is someone that went out to the rural areas and would stay with villagers and stay with townspeople and sit at their table and have meals with them, because he would stay overnight, that kind of thing. It was a kind of it's almost like they didn't have an inn, or they didn't have a hotel back then, or in these places, right? So that's where this is coming through a lot, and there's a lot about that. There's a lot about sharing a meal with someone, and this could be very, very well be coming through as either a message or like a little hint. Let's say there is an issue you're dealing with people or someone. this could be a message, which it feels like, of, hey, sit down to a meal with them. It's almost like underrated these days. Having a meal with someone, sharing a meal with people, the idea of getting to know people, giving them a chance over a meal. There's something very warm and hospitable about that, and resolution driven about that. So just keep that and tuck it in your mind for however that might fit in with whatever might be going on, or might be going on later on, who knows. But it is coming through in a kind of a vivid way about not underestimating sharing a meal with someone, and remembering that it doesn't even have to be any issue or topic, or nothing has to be talked about. It's almost like let the food do the talking, because there is something about transferring your energy of love into food, or your whatever you're feeling into your food, and sharing that. Don't underestimate the power of putting your energy into something that's nonverbal, like communicating again in a nonverbal way. And there's something very peaceable about food. So keep that with you. There's something about that. Make connections however you can when it comes to that. Okay, and then also just a quick thing about, basically this guy's a mailman in a sense. He's a deliverer. He's a messenger. So whatever connection you can make with that. I mean, heck, you might work for the mail company. Like, I don't know. This could also be an idea where if you're in a time in your life right now where maybe you're thinking, what should I be doing? Maybe I want to switch careers. Maybe I want to do this, or like something different. Like you feel like a change, like you want to change. This could be very helpful as far as putting your energy into something that is underrated, that's something you might already do already without even realizing that it could be either one, lucrative, or two, a way to connect you with others, to lead you to where you need to be. So basically it's like this overriding message of don't underestimate just the power of living your life and being who you are, because the things you do naturally are enough, and sometimes it's like right under your nose what you want, and or what you want to do, or what you want, and it's like right there, it's who you are, and you think, oh, it's just who I am, I've been doing this my whole life, or it's so natural to me, I don't even think about it. But it can be more than it is, or it can be more valuable to myself or others in that way. So keep that in mind. And this can also link with the communication, because again, like, you can be an awesome listener, and that's just who you've always been. And a lot of people who are awesome listeners don't realize, oh, that's a God-given gift. Like, I can be an amazing therapist. I can be an amazing counselor. I can be, there's so much you can do with that. But people are blind to it because it's just who they are. Oh, this is just natural. So anyway, I'll leave you with that. Keep making connections where you can. Another thing we can talk about as far as traveling around. You could be someone who likes the idea of traveling to small towns. Do you like the idea of visiting quaint villages, small towns? Let's say you go somewhere like out of the country, or you go somewhere where everyone else goes to the big tourist areas, and maybe you love the museums too, whatever. But maybe you make it a point that it's important to you to visit the local areas, the small towns, the places that when you go on vacation for just 5 days, usually you just want to hit the big spots, but you're like, no, we have to go to this local pub that, I found in this weird forum that all the locals go to. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Now, on the other hand, on the opposite connection would be if you didn't want to travel. So because this person traveled so much, this aspect of you traveled so much, it could be that you came back into this life wanting to just root down, commit to one land, one place, not have to leave in your homebody, and you just want to stay still. And that's okay. But if that's the case, it'd be because this person did so much traveling for a living, and just, it would make sense your soul would want to experience something else. So make connections with the travel theme however you can, all right? And we're going to go to the first important day now. So here we have the war card. Now, this doesn't always mean like a battle out in the field. It can mean a war internally, or just what's it called, like a dispute or whatever. So the relationship card here, this is friends. And the feelings are betrayed. So what this feels like is actually, it does feel like there's a war. It feels like there's a war like on the horizon. It feels like you're being notified because your job is going to be to round up people. So, okay, so it feels like there is a war that has begun, like a war declaration with another country, region, whatever, that were allies before. And it's almost like it shouldn't be happening, but it is. So I feel like that's where the friends card is coming in, is because it's almost like a shock to hear that, oh my God, we're going to war with them. Are you sure? Like that kind of thing, because you're supposed to be allies, friends. It feels like there's been a lot of peace between you for so long, maybe even like your entire lifetime, where you've only heard stories of, in history when you weren't allies, and then here it is again happening where, oh my gosh, okay, I guess we're going to war. So it feels like on this day is when you're notified and when you're sent out. So it feels like we're looking at you kind of being charged with your most important job yet, because it feels like it's something you've never done, where you're going to have to go out now to all these, your region, your areas, and you're going to have to tell people, hey, we're drafting for the war. We're going to need all the men. That's what it feels like. So what you could do is look at the time period I gave you and then the region, like Russia or whatever, and see if there was a war during that time with a country that would have otherwise have been allies, and also see, like Google, if Russia drafted people for war. Look into that and see if you can, find some facts on that. That'd be really good and validating, quite frankly. So what we can do here is make connections with a couple ideas here. Okay, so one, is a huge thing that triggers you in your life. Well, I guess it would trigger a lot, but it's coming up for a reason. Okay, so it's almost like in your life, have you dealt with friends betraying you? Have you dealt with finding it hard to trust friends, finding it hard to warm up to friends, or let people in a certain level? It would take a while for that, if that makes sense. If that's the case, and if you find that it takes a while for you to let people into your inner circle, it could be just a kind of a residue of this feeling of shock, because it feels like a shock. Everyone's shocked, like they did not see this coming. So that's how it can roll over into your current life. Now, on the other hand, there could be another thing that feels like it's coming through as far as testing people. Now, do you feel like in romantic relationships or new friendships, or even just relationships in general, do you find that you test people? And this can be, little ways like it's hard, because it's almost like, oh, well, if someone's late to meet you, do you feel betrayed? Do you feel like you're less? Do you allow yourself to get your feelings hurt if, let's say, someone doesn't keep, not a promise, but like, obviously, because if someone doesn't keep a promise, that's like a big like, no, but it's more like if someone isn't on time, if it's certain standards, that's what I want to say. I don't know why this is coming out. It's kind of like, it feels like it's a very like niche-y, tricky way to bring it out here, but it's something about you having certain standards for relationships, and if someone can't meet the standards like the first time, do you find that you might be a harsher critic or have high standards, if that makes sense? So if you find that that's the case, maybe you do have high standards, maybe you do test people in whatever way that means, because we all have different ways that we test people. It's a very human thing to do. So first of all, it's important to know that if you do find that these traits are part of who you are, part of your life, or you've distributed them or whatever, it's not to like feel bad about it or think like, feel guilty to like be someone that tests someone. Like, you're a human being. So just know it's really being brought up to show you that it's happening for a reason. So if it's, again, hard for you to trust people right away, or you have high standards, or you test people, it's because of what's going on here. It's a residue. So this would be coming up, that in case you do have these traits about you, and in case you're at a point in your life where you feel like maybe they're a hindrance, or maybe they act as obstacles to good communication or solid relationships, or feeling like you can really just let go and have good relationships and not care whether someone is late or someone does make an excuse not to hang out one time, or whatever it is, you can let it go and not hang on to it or not feel bad about it, or anything like that, this is coming up to let you know that, hey, maybe it's a good time to learn to process that and to recognize those traits are just human and they're residue, and you can learn to let them go to live a more like freer life, if that makes sense. And to really actually, it's more about appreciating people, individuals, your friends, appreciating them for who they are despite their flaws, recognizing we all have flaws, you know? So keep that in mind. I feel like this is meant for relationships in your life, whether it's romantic or friendship, that this could help in a big way. And there's a lot of things too where we are in denial about certain parts of ourselves. So this can simply be being brought up, easy for me to say, just to make you look inside and make sure that you are aware of certain things about yourself. Maybe there are things that people have told you where you're like, no, or whatever, or something like that. Or maybe it's just things you've never noticed about yourself that maybe you've started to notice, or maybe it's time to start to notice, time to start digging deep and being honest with yourself about some things, because every human being has been or is or at some point will be in denial about something about themselves that they might consider not so good, like something they might not like about themselves that is part of themselves that they can change, but they just don't even want to address it because it's a lot of work. Does that make sense? That's what this could be about. So just, take it with a grain of salt, feel it out, see how you feel, see what connections you make, and we're going to go to the next important day, but keep making connections where you can there, okay? Okay. Oh, real quick though, this can also be about your ideas of war. So if you're someone that's anti-war and you're just like, this is BS, like why are we fighting kind of deal, that would also be something here. As well as a quick connection about you being the bringer of bad news. If you have a hard time giving someone bad news, if you struggle with that, if you struggle with let's say you're a teacher and you have to, if someone flunked because they didn't do the work, do you feel guilty for having to tell someone that they didn't do the work? That would be another thing, another connection coming up, because this isn't your fault yet. What do they say? Don't kill the messenger, don't shoot the messenger. And here you are in the line of fire having to tell people that they're going to have to leave their home and go fight. So that's like a huge responsibility and a burden. So in your current life, if you connect it with that in any way, it could be that you're someone that really hates to give bad news to the point where you might like really suffer, or you punish yourself for something that is not your fault or something that is out of your control, and yet you are the person that has to deliver the news, or you're the one that's aware of it and has to make others aware of it. So if you avoid that kind of thing, that would make a lot of sense. Otherwise, the direct connection would be that you can handle it. You're great in an emergency. You're level-headed, and you can hang with all of that because this person had to. Okay, sorry. So let's go to the next important day. Just a lot there, and keep making connections in whatever way you can with this too. So on this day, we're seeing a graduation. Graduation does not always mean academic. It can mean graduation in your mentality, your emotionality, your spirituality. There's a lot of alities that you could be graduating with. And then the relationship here is spouse. And the feeling here is disappointment. So what this feels like is happening is your job is being recognized of how good you... It feels like you do your job very well. You're very efficient. And you're very, you're able to get the job done, but you're, what's it called when you get a lot, social, like you have good social skills. So it almost feels like if there's a fleet of mailmen, you're the captain, like that kind of thing. You get it. You're in charge. It's like you're the best at what you do. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's what it feels like. And it feels like this is a promotion, but it doesn't feel like it's a promotion so much at work, because it feels like it's already a respected position that you're in. It feels like it's a promotion in society, and it feels like it's done because of your work here. It's almost like you really rounded up people in a way that made it so they didn't hate you and they didn't resent the government or whatever it is. There's something about however you did it that was very efficient, and it got people on board. Almost like, I would say, like how you speaker, a speaker that inspires, a motivational speaker. Yeah, it's almost like that. Like you did your job and went beyond by doing like a motivational speech at all these places you went to kind of rally them to get them together, realizing that if you were just to go and say, hey, you're drafted, these people would probably revolt, or they would resent you and resent the government, whatever it is. So you did it in a way that was not even required of you. You went above and beyond, and you got noticed for that by your, let's say, boss, whoever that is. And it feels like the kind of promotion that they give for that kind of thing is an adjustment in your rank socially. So it feels like you are married into a higher family, and it feels like the disappointment comes in because although you are honored, the marriage itself is not likable. It's not joyous. It's like you get all of the perks of this like this higher up in society kind of thing, the respect and the money and all that stuff, and yet there's really no love here. It's almost like it feels like the wife is almost resentful, having to kind of marry down and being used as property in order to like gift you a promotion kind of deal. So it feels like it's not like there's animosity between you two, but it just feels like there's no love and no real compassion there. It's just like going through the motions of a marriage, and it's almost like there's no heart. And so that's where the disappointment comes in, and I feel like that is just like a really big message of, it's not be careful what you wish for so much as it's not always greener on the other side, if that makes sense. It's more like what you think you want might not actually be what you want, or in another way of putting it, if you are into manifestation or you've heard of manifesting this and that, it's being careful with the intention you set of what you do want to bring into your life. Because, excuse me, because again, it's just about learning to be in the present moment, learning to be happy with what you have, and when you are settled in that state, that's when the things that you never imagined you even wanted will come into your life to enhance it and add to it because you're already happy and present. So it's almost like a little message that if you find your mind wandering into the future, wanting certain things, wishing for certain things, that's fine. That's okay to imagine and visualize a better life, a happier life. But don't dwell there, as well as don't dwell in the past. You've heard all this, I'm sure, is let go of that past. That causes anxiety. Let go of the future. It causes worry. You can't do anything about the anxiety or the worry except feel it. It's not going to solve anything. But what solves the feeling of lack or the feeling of not quite having what you want, what solves it is being very present and grateful for what it is that you do have, because no one's life is perfect. Everyone's got some trouble here and there, but if you focus on what's good while taking care of the issues, you focus on that good stuff and you stay present, then you don't have to you don't have to worry about even stuff you can't control that's out of your control. So if that is in your life right now where you feel like there might be things that's kind of out of your control, it's because you're probably worrying about not having what you want to have, which is in the future, or maybe even reminiscing or remembering things in the past that you wish you could do a different way or this or that, but you can't change it. You can forgive it, and that does a lot, but don't dwell there. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's what's coming through, is that whole concept of it's okay to, wish for things and to do your manifestation stuff or whatever, but remember the most important time is your present moment. And I feel like that is what is coming through. And I feel like that's coming through too, because I feel like part of him always wished for more, even though he was quite happy. There was always a part of him that wanted more, would see the higher society and yearn for that, and then finally getting it, it's a loveless marriage. It ends up just being an empty, loveless marriage. And that's not fun. I mean, yeah, money and this and that or whatever, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. So keep making connections where you can when it comes to this. and we are going to go ahead and move to the death. Now, this death card over here, this is disease and illness, and I'm just feeling out to see what we've got going on here. Okay, so right away what's coming through is cold. Okay, well that makes sense. Russia is a cold place, so what's going on? Was there winter? So there's a winter. What's going on in the winter time? What's happening? Because there's something that happens. Okay, so it feels like there is something going around. Feels like you catch something that is going around and taking away a lot of people, and it feels like you're just one of the victims. You're just one of the people that doesn't make it through the winter because of that thing that's going around. And it feels like something that we might even get today, maybe like a bronchitis kind of thing, but the medicine isn't there for that. So it feels like, yeah, it just feels like you don't make it through. So, okay, blah, 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 yeah, okay. Okay, so also, that's another thing you might want to Google during that time period. If there was something that swept through the land during one winter that kind of wiped out people, that would be bronchitis-y, pneumonia-ish. You know, I can't exactly say what, but how you would connect to this, if you connect at all, would be one, do you prefer warmer weather? Do you not like the idea of living in cold weather, cold climates, snowy climates? On the other hand, you very well could like cold, snowy stuff anyway, just because you lived your whole life there and you liked it there. You liked your life. So it could be one way or the other, but it's the idea of climate, cold versus warmth, you know, that kind of thing as a theme. The other thing would be if you have a weak immune system or a weak respiratory system. That's where I feel like it hit you, was the breathing area or the lungs or that area of your body. So if you have asthma or allergies that affect anything that affects your breathing issue, or if you're someone that gets a cold every winter, or maybe you do get bronchitis in the winter sometimes, like that kind of thing that crops up in your life, it would just be residue from here. So if you notice that if it is in your life, and if it's like a pattern kind of thing, that's a pattern you could totally get rid of through meditation or through hypnosis or whatever, once you realize it's residue. It's coming from a totally different time. And a lot of times that we see that a lot because, you know, death can be a real shocker for people, and a lot of times their soul memory will carry that over into their cellular memory as well when they reincarnate. So it's kind of a cool, interesting thing, but keep that in mind. This can also mean that you get cold very easily. So if you notice your hands, feet get cold all the time kind of deal, that would be another connection. If you don't make any connection with this, that's fine. Don't even worry about it. Now, the lesson is cool. So in this lesson I like a lot. It's the enlightenment lesson, and what this is referring to mainly is this part right here where we were talking about how once you finally get what you thought you wanted, it's not as grand as you think it is. And even though it might not have like felt good here, just like everything in life that feels icky situations you have to go through, they're all lessons. Great lessons, which is another thing coming through just to remind you, see those hard times in life as awesome opportunities to get these lessons learned and out of the way so you don't have to go through them again. So we're looking at lessons here because here's the thing, if this lesson happens to repeat itself in your current life about, you know, the whole like getting out of the present, focusing on a future or past, like just, you know, like wishing for things and spending so much time wishing for things when you could be spending all that time really just focusing on the joy that you have currently, like that kind of thing, it would be because he didn't quite learn the lesson, even though he lived it. He learned a bit of it, but he didn't finish it because he ended up with what he thought he wanted, but that wasn't it. So in your current life, you have the chance to now be aware of it and kind of do something about it. If you find yourself going down that path again of wanting, wishing, hoping, dreaming, and then who knows if you get it, is it going to cause misery? Is it not going to be everything you've lived up to? Or can you rein yourself back to the present moment and find that the amazing things in life happening now, which only once you focus on that, because what you focus on brings more of it, you're going to start getting the good stuff coming in when you're able to focus on the present, if that makes sense. So that's what this card is referring to, is the enlightenment that did occur here, because a big chunk of the lesson was learned when he got what he asked for, which was not what he thought it would be. That's a huge life lesson. And it sounds kind of sucky or miserable, but in a soul sense, it's a beautiful lesson to learn, because it feels like if it wasn't completed here, it feels like it's like almost there. It's like right there. Like it's if you already haven't learned it in your current life, this could be just being brought up to kind of like say, hey, good job, you already learned it. If you feel like what we're talking about here has already come and gone in your life and you've learned that lesson. So just keep your eyes open and stay aware. And sometimes these lessons are a process where you feel like you did complete it and then it just comes kind of around again in that spiral pattern. So you just have to kind of keep playing it out in the same way as you get older and you learn, and you just keep applying that great lesson to it over and over again, and it gets easier and easier, that kind of thing. So that's what I feel like this is. But there can be so much more that you're connecting with personally to enlightenment. Are you seeing a huge growth in your own spiritual development? This can mean, like that's what we're here talking about is, are you interested in psychic development? Are you interested in dabbling in esoteric things and spiritual things where this aspect of you didn't have the time or the inclination to do that, and now here you are in your current life on your path to enlightenment, becoming aware of things like the ascension and 5D and self-sovereignty and your self-empowerment and self-love and frequencies and raising your vibration, all those great things. So that's what it could connect with as well. And if what I'm talking about is vibing with you, then that's also what this applies to. So anything I say in here, you have to vibe with. You have to take it with a grain of salt, and it has to vibe with you. So if it resonates with you and vibes with you, then you can take it as truth. Otherwise, just discard anything that doesn't apply to that resonance within you, if that makes sense. All right, so keep making connections where you can. And there's your past life. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're able to make some connections. And thanks for letting me read you.